Hi, I'm Christy Cordingley, and this is my show, The Flare Up Show, and this special episode is produced in partnership with Clarissa Burt and In the Limelight Media. I originally created this show to advocate for myself through chronic illness, but today it's grown into a wellness show that's listened to all over the world. I love to practice well-being for the whole being. So if you're ready to rise, thrive, and elevate your life, stay tuned, enjoy the show, and thanks for listening. Hi, welcome to the Flare Up Show. This is produced by In the Limelight Media and the fabulous Clarissa Burt. And today I have a guest all the way from the Netherlands. As a young boy, Machiel Hoek didn't understand the world at all. Why was there so much suffering? I love your bio, by the way. I'm just going to put that in there because it reads like a story, so it's very intriguing. Why was there so much suffering? Why was he bullied at school for being himself? At the age of 7, he decided he wanted to discover the secret of life, but then the so-called real world stepped in, as it does for a lot of us, meaning school and study. After university, he worked as a CPA, entrepreneur, and international CEO for over 20 years. At some point, there was a very large sum of money waiting for him if he would just stay on for just 2 more years. Then I can finally go on this quest to discover the secret of life, he thought. But at that moment, his heart kicked in and said, no, now. Now is the time. You need to do this now or you will never do it. By listening to his heart, the bag of money at that time would disappear, but what was worth more? So Machiel complied with his heart, changed his entire life, and went on the quest to discover the secret of life. He found his, and through his best-selling book, The Girl Who Changed the World, he now helps others to find theirs. He focuses on the recognition of our common ground, our common source, whatever we each call it, reconciliation, and the importance of restoring the balance between men and women on our planet through feminine leadership. Welcome, Machiel. I'm very excited to have you today.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, did you find the secret of life? That's the question that burns after I read that. What's the secret? What's the secret? That's what everybody wants to know, right? What is
I
the
found
secret
mine,
of
of
life?
course.
Yes.
I'll tell you in a second, but I thought that also when I grew up, I thought the older you get, the more you know, and the less magic there will remain in life. The magic will disappear, or at some point you'll be old and you die, of course, but then there's nothing, no much, not much magic more to be discovered. And at some point, of course, when I went on this quest and I found that it was the total opposite, of course. The more you think you know, or the less you know, the more magic there is, and it never stops. So when I found my secret, it opened up a door of endless more new secrets to be discovered. It's like this will never stop. It was like going on and on and on. It was that is great and overwhelming, and I'm like on a trip each day to discover new ones. This secret for me was the realization that for me the world is my mirror, and I think that what a lot of old scriptures and a lot of old religions say as well at some point, saying the world is actually showing you what you are. You are being reflected what you see in the world, and we are taught, at least in the Western world, that the world is a given, is a fact. Everything is solid, and everything that happens out there is happening independently, and it comes to you. Whereas at some point, and that is, of course, also what I describe in this novel, you can also make after to the realization that the world comes out of you. You project it literally. Your senses are, of course, detectors, but they're also sending out information, and it's being reflected in the world. And by changing your own mindset, your thoughts, your feelings, the world changes. Of course, a couch will still stay a couch, but the whole element of what it means to you and how you feel by it and how you're affected by it and what it does to you and what you do with it is totally changed by your own approach to that.
I love that. And I would think about my couch. When I'm not doing well, there's like an imprint of me on the couch because I sit in the same spot every day. So the couch does change as we get more into our own secrets and
Nice one.
magic and exploratory. The less time there is to make that imprint on the couch. I don't have to move the couch every once in a while to sit in a different spot.
I like that. And you're talking about the spot. That was another realization for me
Yeah.
about, of course, where you are at any given moment. You're the only one that can be there. No one else can be at the exact same position as you are.
Oh.
And the position you are is, of course, as I said, the senses radiate, but you also detect. Of course, you radiate, and then it is being reflected upon you. So any point where you are is unique. You're always on a unique point of perception, point of view, point of whatever
Yeah.
comes to you. And that point makes how you see the world differently because indeed on your couch, if you replace or if you place your couch on a different location in your living room, you see the world, you see the things differently. If you have a conversation with someone and you choose change places, the environment and the energy becomes different because everything you look at from the other side. So um, and that has always been my life model. Try to be able to step in anyone else's shoes, to understand where they come from and to understand what they've experienced, and to even maybe experience that you could have been anyone in this world, if you grew up on the same place like anyone else, like someone else did, and if you had the same upbringing, the same DNA, the same experiences, you would exactly become the same person because that's the script that you follow at some point. So you could have been the worst criminal, you could have been the Mother Teresa, you could have been anyone, and by realizing that, it becomes a different way of looking at, let's say, opponents or people you disagree with.
Hmm.
And that is, and I'll stop talking then, but it's about what I realized in my life is that polarization in our world is ever increasing in these days.
Yes.
And from a European perspective, we see it a lot in America, but of course we have it in Europe as well, where it says either you're here or there, you're with me or against me, you're good or bad, you're a Republican or a Democrat, or whatever. But great leaders in the past, and especially in let's say ancient societies, were always working together, finding the common ground, finding how can we solve this together, how can we make this work together, instead of opposing, saying I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm going to make you feel you're wrong, and I'm going to do it my way. And I
Yes.
think that's a recipe for more destruction in our world, more calamities, and more of the things that we see today, and all yeah, all wars going on, all battles, and that's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. There's so much I want to unpack there, and I still want to get back to the beginning of your story too. But when you talk about polarization, you mentioned America, so I'm Canadian, so, but Clarissa, who produces the show, is American, of course. So this is something that we experience here quite in
Mhm.
Technicolor. And you talk about MANA, Make America Nice Again, which I really like, because I always say mega, make empathy great again. Like,
I like it. I like it. Thank
yeah.
you. Yes.
Yes, it's about why the polarization, the width, it's either you're there or you're here. And it's really come from this, I think, this is just a theory, this individualism, because people are somewhat working on themselves, but they're not learning how to integrate that into the community. We're still a community, even though, yes,
Yeah.
the world reflects back who we are. We still have to engage with the energy, which you mentioned. We're still that changes with everywhere we go. So if we don't learn how to be the best version ourselves that benefits our community, we're always going to be a little bit behind. That's what I think
I fully
anyways.
agree. I fully agree there. And that brings me maybe to another point. What I, for me, was a realization through this quest of seeking the secret of life. I didn't understand the world as a child, and I later understood why that was. I realized the world at some point, I realized the world is totally out of balance in terms of when you look at it from a masculine and feminine side.
Yes.
Um, our Western society, but I think the whole world has been, let's say, masculinized for millennia. And that's not a question about toxic masculine energy or whatever, but it's anything that becomes out of balance, becomes overwhelming and suppressing the other parts, becomes out of balance and at some point will destroy itself.
Yes.
And I think that's what the polarization does. The polarization individualism that you talked about is a specific masculine element. And that's all good in the realm of spirituality and yin and yang because they need to be in balance. You have to be individualized to be able to be a part of a group. But the feminine energy looks at the bigger picture, look at the bigger part, is about cooperation, it's about longer term thinking, whereas masculine is more on the shorter term thinking, more about the ego, more about itself, and they two should be in balance. And that's why I'm really focused on trying to bring the message about feminine leadership and feminine energy, because that I think is what is necessary, or the real solution for the problems in our world. Every problem, every polarized problem, every war, every conflict in the world is caused by man, fought by man, and fueled by man. And I think what we need is an overarching energy, because on this level, like Einstein said, you cannot solve a problem on the level where it was created. You need a higher level. And I think the feminine energy is overarching because um, it's not about men and women only, but let's make it easy. Women are able to reconcile on a different level. They have a different, of course, way of dealing with things, but they are the source of life on our planet. Of course, without men, there wouldn't be alive, but they're giving birth. And that alone is already a connection which men don't have in that way, and they don't have to have it. But the solution, in my view, is we need this overarching energy and we need a reset of the system. We don't need 50-50 men and women in boardrooms and in politics because the system is masculinized. So we need a reset of the system, bring it back to values where we are really on a 50-50 or an equal level, balancing these energies.
With authenticity, not quota reaching, right? So it's not about just having, which is what you just said. I always think too about the feminine and the masculine, and I think about sort of the planet as Mother Earth, as the planet as feminine. And I think if you want to see what people really feel about women, watch how they treat the planet. And I find there is a correlation between the exploitation and the plundering and the using up of resources.
Yes.
There does seem to be a correlation there, I find. And I think that if we had more, yeah, more of that balance, of that equilibrium between the two, the appreciation of the diversity between the two, and how we actually work best together,
Mhm.
so many of those problems will become solvable, I think.
Solvable indeed, and it requires firm steps to get there,
Yes.
and that's why, of course, in yin and yang you have this big black and this big white path, but each of them have the circle of the other part in it because that's the
Yeah.
spark that combines them and ignites it, and it keeps the whole system
Yes.
rolling. And I think uh, this is general talking, of course, but I think in this light, the feminine energy, feminine leaders needs a masculine spark in there to spark the move and say, okay, we
Yes.
need to be firm here. We need to be really powerful here, rise over our own, I say maybe perceived limitations, because feminine energy is much more powerful than masculine energy if it is in its real, natural element. And I think what we have done on Earth in this millennia is depowering it in such a way that, and my heart breaks saying it, that also women tend to disempower and depower each other
Yes.
instead of empowering, where men are more easily able to empower each other. They fight and then they, of course, rejoin. Um, but women are let's say, able of keeping each other down for certain reasons. And that's why I think also the Clarissa, with her self-esteem regime, is really touching upon that point, saying
Hmm.
we need to get that self-esteem back to a level where it is able to overarch this and get to the solving of the issue that we have on this planet, and that really requires also masculine energy, because steps need to be taken, really decisions need to be made, and systems have to be broken down and rebuilt.
Yes. Yes. So if we could go back to sort of towards the beginning of your story, so you obviously you mentioned in your story that you knew there was something worth searching for before you got to the place of searching. Do you remember when that started within you? You know, even as a young boy, I know you mentioned that you were bullied, which would mean that probably in some ways you felt different. Is
Sure.
there, where did it start where you're kind of like, one day I'm going to have to look for this because I feel there's something more to this world?
I just know that at some point I really had this vivid sentence in my head. In this life, I'm going to discover the secret of life. That was like a conviction. It's like, I'm going to do this. And I was seven. So it's like a strange thought for a 7-year-old boy. So it was only, I know that it was there and it was then again out of my system. So it was maybe something that was like a prelude for later on.
Hmm.
But I indeed didn't just understand it. And being bullied is like, you cannot be yourself. And that feels wrong. But if you're being bullied, for most people, it feels I'm incomplete. I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I struggled with that. And for one part about this feminine and masculine energy, I felt more in touch with or more at ease with feminine energy than with masculine energy. I at that point I thought masculine energy was dark, was aggressive, was really. I was afraid of that. And until I on this quest, I was able to reconcile myself with my masculine part and balance the two energies in myself. I could well see this, at least for myself, this element of why we're out of balance and what needs to be done to bring it back into balance. So I think it was those elements, more being comfortable with being looking at feminine energy than at masculine energy, and that's important to notice, of course, about masculine and feminine energy. It's not about men against women, of course. In majority, you could say that it is, but there's a lot of men, of course, who are in touch with their feminine side, and there's a lot of women who are in touch with their masculine side. It's about balancing it and being in your true own power, and that means for some men to be very much on the feminine side, and for some women to be very much on the masculine side. That's for everyone else, everyone on its own to decide.
Yes. Yes. And then you get to this point in your career where things are obviously going very, very well, and you have the opportunity for it as far as wealth and riches and fame to get even bigger. But that's the moment that you decide, no, it has to be now.
Yes, it was
What led you to know it had to be now?
just my it was really an inner voice, and I've never experienced that before in my life, and only experienced once after. A real voice in myself saying, I was literally sitting my first holiday in years with my then wife in France at a beautiful villa we rented, and just out in the beautiful weather sipping a nice glass of white French wine. And I thought, okay, 2 more years, and then I can go out and do what I really want, what I came here for, actually, I thought, and find this, go search for the secret of life. And just then, just this, my heart, my inner voice said, no, 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 no. You gotta, if you want to do it, you do it now. And it was such a strong voice, because otherwise I wouldn't have believed it. But it was really like, what is this? And I was just for 1 millisecond annoyed by it, because I knew what it meant, that if I would take the decision, that I would give up everything I worked so hard for. And that's, of course, typical masculine aspect in the world. Of course, our accomplishments are measured in terms of wealth, finance, results, positions that we build, fame, and that's one way of looking at it. But the other way of looking at being at ease with yourself, and being comfortable with yourself, and knowing that what you are doing matters, in the end, is much more important. But for me, it was quite a hard few seconds at the end at that moment. But I realized my heart is worth much more than anything else, and I knew that this voice was right. And I've seen a lot of people who at that point first they said, "Oh, you're crazy. Why are you doing this?" And later said, "Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this as well. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to stop working because this is very important." And no one does it, because indeed the only moment always to do something different is now. If you want to stop smoking, don't wait until 1st of January. Do it now, because otherwise probably you won't do it.
Yeah, that's all we have is right now. It's the only time we get to be present.
Yeah,
Um, and then
clear
so
said than done.
yes. So you made this decision, and then what? Like, how did you start this journey, and how was it easy? Was it difficult? How did you let it unfold from there?
I thought, okay, I'm gonna do. I was planning to write a book about it. When I searched for the secret of life as a child, I thought I had to do it by my brain, by my ratio, by my logic, by my intellect. So I read in that 37 years to follow. I read over 2,000 books about religions. I read every religious book, spiritual book about aliens, about reincarnation, about pyramids, whatever you want to call it. I wanted to understand.
Hmm.
Um, but that gave me some concept, but it didn't give me the experience. So when I started on this quest, I thought, I'm going to write a book about it, and I'm going to write a book about it that I would have wanted to read when I was a child or a teenager, a young adult, to give me these answers. So I planned this, like I came from a business world, so I was used to planning. So I planned it. I'm going to write this book in 1 year. This is how I'm going to do it. This is research. This is going to be planning. And after 2 months, I hadn't even written a single usable word on paper, and was just more confused. And then once more, this voice came to me and said, just relax and let yourself surrender to the flow of life and see what happens. I had dug this canal in my head from A to B, like a straight line, and it became a
Hmm.
meandering river going everywhere, but I didn't know where. So I just, yeah, literally let go of everything, stopped doing, and just started doing things I've never did before. And that gave me, let's say, the experience I needed to, yeah, experience what I thought I learned. But then the experience also, of course, always different and much more powerful, because that's your own experience.
Yes. And how did that lead you to the feminine and to understanding and wanting to talk and educate and really have people experience the feminine side of leadership.
I got on a, let's say, interaction of ancient approaches like shamanism and other, let's say, older ancient society approaches of dealing with the cosmos, dealing with yourself, understanding that the smallest part, like the smallest atom, is equal to the largest part, like the whole universe. They're governed by the same principles. And knowing that is one thing, but experience that is a different way. And you're doing it through meditation, through certain experiences, through certain ceremonies. I went through a lot of those. And at some point, it's for me opened up a world of understanding how quantum mechanics, quantum
Mhm.
physics would interact with this old knowledge that has been there for millennia, even before, let's say, Egypt and other times. Understanding why things work out that way, and everything is frequency, everything is vibration, everything is constant in motion, everything is interacting with yourself. Nothing is stable, although we still think this, and we know this is a couch, but everything is constantly in motion and interacting and reacting upon your own energy and the other way around. And that brought me at some point to, well, getting rid of my own pains and ancestral pains, because I also understood that
Mhm.
in our lives, well, maybe you've experienced the same. We're also burdened by the pain of our ancestors. They
Mhm.
bring it on to us through our DNA and through our energy and the way we're raised. And so we pick up things that we haven't even experienced ourselves, but it's still in our system. So getting it out means we're healing not only ourselves, but also our parents and our ancestors. That's really a wonderful way of looking at it. And by doing that, you're just taking care of yourself, but you're taking care of the world as well. And that for me brought on step by step more to this balance of yin yang, masculine, feminine, and understanding what is the golden mean. Where's the balance, and why are we never in balance? We don't have to be always in a balance because we're always in motion, but everything in nature and the universe thrives or strives to get into balance. It always gets to this balanced state. Apart from our, let's say, society where we've been on one side for far too long.
Mhm. Yes. And how has the reception or response been as you've put your book out in public and as you've shared this knowledge and your experience? What have you
Um,
experienced out there?
I first thought I still have, let's say, an ambition, and that's kind of contradiction, of course. Um, I want to change the world, of course. It's the book called "The Girl Who Changed the World," but I want to change the world myself. I want to be able to be part of that change because I see the need for it, and of course, that's what I think I need to do. But the responses from readers were at first saying, "Okay, wow, this is a book that made me." I got two responses which were really gave me goosebumps. Like someone said, "I now understand my parents. I now understand my childhood, and I now understand my life because I know what happened to them has happened to me and how they processed it, and I can now be able to reconcile with that and with my parents. And now I can finally live for myself." That was really wow. And I got a letter from an 85-year-old woman, and she said, "I was treated by by a psychiatrist for over 10 years, and there wasn't any progress. And at some point, he said, 'I'm going to stop the therapy, or you got to read this book from Machiel.'" Um, and she said, "I didn't want to read your book, but he made me read it because otherwise he would stop the therapy." And I read it and read it and read it. At some point, I finished it, and I called my son, and we haven't been in touch for 20 years. And I reconciled with him, and now we're back together, and I can see my grandchildren again, and now I can finally die in peace. She was able to reconcile things, and that for me was, well, realization. If you change one life, that's so wonderful. What else do I want? So why do I have the ambition to get this book out there to so many people? Still, there is, of course, but these stories for me are wow. I treasure them, and that for me is very valuable. Those are treasures.
Absolutely. Share a little bit about the book. What is it about? How does it work? What do you hope people get when they take it open and start reading through it?
What I wanted is a book that you start reading and finish. I
Yes.
read a lot of books about self-help books and about all these topics, but they were more or less non-fiction. So you can start reading at some point, you stop because I want to have something that pulls you through. So I wanted to be a novel, the same way like Plato and Socrates. So if you want to tell people, give people something that they can learn from, you have to do it in a story. So
Story.
for me, it became a story about a young girl, and for her, the whole world is against her. It feels she has a lot of adversity. Some people can call it a small adversity. For some people, it's big adversity, but for her, it's adversity, and she's not able to cope with it. And she's at a week at her grandfather's house, and he notices that she's struggling with this. So he invites her to take on this quest for the quest for looking for the secret of life. But he doesn't tell her how. Of course, he lets her experience it herself. So he brings her in a lot of
Mm.
positions, and explains how things work, but also let her experience it herself and confronts her with her biggest fears in order to get to a process where she is able to say, hey, the world is maybe not the way I see it, and I have total control. Because if the world is your mirror, that means one thing, that gives you endless responsibility because you're responsible for everything that out there that happens, and it gives you endless possibilities because everything is possible. And that is the bandwidth that you can then work from. And at some point, of course, she gets to that element, but with her feminine intuition energy, she realized that her grandfather is really not really walking his talk. He's a wise man, but he made some mistakes or did some things in his life what he's not proud about, and he needs to solve them. So at some point, she confronts him with that, and he goes through his own pain at that moment to discover what went askew there, and to get to his own healing and reconciliation with himself, his parents, his grandparents, everything above that. And so both their lives then are changed. And that for me is the message of this the pure feminine energy, which works on a different level than masculine energy, confronting the masculine and saying, hey, you got to do this different. Things got to change. Otherwise, I don't want to be your granddaughter anymore in this way.
Oh, it's beautiful. And it is a beautiful story and it is so readable. Like I like that you put it like in a fable, like in a story. Some of my favorite books where I've learned the most are put in that way. So I think you definitely achieved
Wow.
achieved that. It's one of those read through moments. Absolutely. So let's say we talked about we talk about I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. You talked a bit about America and you live in Europe. But you really are focusing on this on a world scale. But is there something specific to America that has your focus, or is
Yeah.
it really just trying to get the message to every place that needs it?
The latter, of course, but America. When I started writing this book, I started writing in English. I thought I want to be published by a big New York publisher.
Yes.
Get it. Of course, that didn't work. I had to write it in my own mother tongue, and then had it translated, etc., etc. And start here. But in my view, America is such a influential country in the world. It is so in its scale, the biggest country that has been, let's say, created in its current state. Of course, there were ancestors and people that lived there for millennia, but the current setup, the current structure of the country is, of course, only a few centuries old, which is much younger than most countries in the world. And it had such tremendous influence. Of course, in Europe, we were saved by the Allies, by America from in World War II. So we have a lot of uh, to be grateful for.
Yes.
Um, but what we also see is that America is so influential in the world, and because it's your country is such a relatively young country, things have developed in a way um, where things already were put on this masculine level. If I would think of the most masculinized or the masculine country of our Western world, that would be America. So I thought that's the best place to to start or to get this message out, because bringing about this message about feminine and masculine energy and leadership, if this works in America, it would have effect in the whole world because America is still so influential in the world. And no matter about politics, no matter about political preferences, I think, um, especially and I'm saying this from a man's perspective, but for a lot of women, the next few years will become quite tough or challenging. And I think that we need to prepare for that and also for the time thereafter. Um, and I think in the end, it will all be all right, but we're going through turbulent times, or everywhere in the world right now. So things sometimes have to become worse before they get better. And I think
Yes.
that's what we're seeing right now. And
Me too.
America is, I think, a pivotal country, a pivotal society, um, based on its history, based on where it's now, to be let's say, the new guide for the world, but only if things change, because in this current setup, it won't be a guiding country much longer. And I wouldn't love to see that.
Yes, 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 yes to all of that. Yes. How can we, us that are here with boots on the ground, how can we all play a role in getting this message out and, you know, making the world nicer again? How can we all participate?
I think a lot of things are working that way. What I think is that, let's say, the movie Barbie, I call my book the, let's say, Barbie meets Oppenheimer, because it's about
Yes.
quantum physics, about masculine, feminine energy. I think the movie Barbie did a great job in highlighting some topics there, really brought them out in a wonderful way, and I think that's what needs to be done more. But I think what is really necessary is, I think, within women and groups of women, to question how, if we are able to change the system, how can we do that? What should be done? And how should that new system look? How should a system work where, and I'm talking here about yin and yang, look at it from a spiritual way. We have yang, which is masculine energy, and yin. Yin is the creative, and the creative feminine energy, and yang is the foundation. If it's explained in the principle, yang is the foundation, the bearer, but it's in service of the feminine energy, because the feminine energy is creative; it creates new life. So masculine energy supports and is in service of the feminine. Where in our society do we see masculine energy being in service of feminine energy? Where do we see men being really literally in service of women? Almost everywhere, in every situation, organization, it's the other way around. So I think the open question is, because I don't have those answers there, but why, how can we change that? How could we um, either tipple it and make it equal, or at some point, let's say, turn it the other way around? Because, and that's stories. But if you look at ancient societies, ancient civilizations, ancient cultures, there is this balance. And if you look at the animal kingdom, we make this story about alpha males, alpha
Yes.
man in the animal kingdom. That's not the way nature works. If you look at wolves, for instance, which we like to see in terms of a pack of wolves, the man creates safety because, of course, they're strong. They are there for safety.
Yes.
They're bearing it, but the decisions are being made by a older female, because she's the wise one, and she doesn't take decisions lightly. She relates to the whole group. It's the way elephants work, and you could call that a matriarchy or a female matriarchy. I don't know, but we need to change it. And I think, how should we deal with that? The question is, how can we maybe first look from the other way around? How can we topple it up? How can we get to societies and organizations in every structure that the masculine, so men, are in service of women, of feminine energy?
Hmm.
And then move that further.
Yes. Yes. Yes, that alpha, I mean, that was a debunked study specifically about the wolves and the man. The male wolf is a nurturer. They're great parents. It's about the family and making sure the family's safe, protected, and provided for. It's the male and the female are together. They're symbiotic. It's not a dominance thing, and that's
Right.
completely gotten misaligned. We think about discipline, even that was really about teaching, not punishment. And it's just so funny that we've taken such extreme what's the word when we interpret something? We've taken these extreme views on what things should be interpreted as. And I think it is control. There's a bit of uncertainty. So when we think about magic and getting uncomfortable with maybe being uncertain, that does take some courage, right? And I think I was just listening to someone on a show yesterday, a writer named Martha Beck, and she was talking about the reason people create all these external controls, these structures, these rigid structures, is because they aren't capable of getting comfortable with the inside stuff that they've got to clean up and figure out and organize. So they create these massive systems, and then we all have to live by these systems just so people have the semblance of control that will keep them from having to dig inside themselves and start working through that healing that needs to happen, because that is hard work. It is hard work, isn't it?
It is, and that's I think really the key message. That of course it always starts with yourself.
Yes.
There's always inner work to do, and it's not maybe work; it's experiences, it's healing, depending on where you come from,
Yeah.
and of course what you experienced. That's unique for every person in this world.
Mhm.
But it starts with with yourself. It only takes one to change the world, and there's no reason it can't be you, me, anyone. So if you see things in the world that you're out there that you're unhappy with, it also is a reflection of something you're not happy with in yourself, even if probably you didn't know it. And maybe it isn't even your element, but it's your ancestral elements in there, your things that are being processed or really being passed on to you through your parents, grandparents, etc., or something you picked up in your upbringing, your childhood that you don't even remember.
Mhm.
But if you are, let's say, totally at ease with yourself, comfortable with yourself, that you can embrace yourself and fully say, I love myself with all my heart, then the world out there still can look like a troublesome place, but it becomes in a different interaction and you relate to it differently. And it still is always a out and ingoing wave of energy and interaction. And that's life because life is dynamic until we die. And then what happens, happens, depending on your worldview. But I think it's about let's say, what does the world tell you if you would embrace the view that the world is your mirror?
Mhm. So really the next best step for a lot of us is to treat ourselves a little bit more kindly and then let that.
Kindly and being totally in these. I come back to Clarissa's book in it, the self-esteem regime. It's
Yeah.
about also self-esteem and self-love. I think those are the two recipes for healing and for getting to a better side. That's both for men and women, of course. Uh,
Hmm.
that's for all sides. Um, I did a lot of research. I talked to I think over 2,000 women in the age of 20, between 20 and 60, because in their, let's say, working life, and
Yeah.
asked them, who would you rather work with or for or lead? Would it be a group of 10 women or a group of 100 men? And 85% of the women say, please give me the 100 men. It's impossible to work with women only. And that breaks my heart because that there is that it's not inherently wrong about femininity, but I think our society has created such a what you say, like a structure that apparently makes it impossible to work in that way because the system is masculine, and that of course disfavors every feminine quality. So therefore, we need to change it because men are able to work with men. Yes, that's easily because this system favors that, and that's not the way it should be.
No, no, and I guess there's maybe this myth of protection by staying close to the masculine, right? That if we can stay close with them some way, then we can be of use, then we're somewhat protected by them. But that's really the myth. And really we need to be protective of all each other. How
Yeah.
can people find your book? Where can people get in touch with you? How can people learn more about the work that you're doing?
If they want to get in touch with me, just search me, Google my name, or go to my website, machielhoek.com. I have my contact details there. You can contact me. It's also in my book, my contact details, and it's just available on Amazon. Of course, I would love to be in bookshops, but that's a different story. And
Gonna come.
also I'm working on, but it's available on Amazon. And if you get the book, every contact detail is in there. I would love to be in touch with people because I think this is I want to be part of this movement and do whatever I can to be part of the change to a world where we are getting in balance again.
Yes, yes. And before we go, just tell us a bit about where you're at today on your journey. What makes you smile? What makes you happy? What are you discovering?
Part of my change in this journey was that I also realized I wasn't I didn't have children and I wanted to become a father. I had this deeply engraved feeling that I would become a father in my life. And when I changed my whole life, I also had to step out of my relationship, um, met my new love. We wanted to make a child together. And that process was really hard and cumbersome. We had 9 miscarriages, and at some point, like say, okay, this might not happen at all. Um, but I got such deep conviction about it. And at some point, magically, that was a real magical process. She got pregnant, we got pregnant, and our son was born. And
Wow.
for me, looking in his eyes, I'm 51 and he's 4, so I became father quite late.
Yeah.
Every day, looking in his eyes, his smile, of course, his struggles is magical to me. And maybe because I yearned for it so long and the process was so long and cumbersome, maybe that's why I treasure or value it more. But I think a lot of parents can relate to that. That's life, and every child, the energy in their eyes, that makes me smile, and uh, alone, and everything else is bonus to that. But I love life. I love everything that's in it, and I love the dynamics in our world, that is the polarization, the extremes. But I love the balance. I love the center. I love to be in balance, and I love to experience the love and to understand. And then I'll stop talking. The
Yeah.
part of Namaste, the Namaste part, saying that the divine in me, or the spark in me, recognizes the divine or the spark in you. We are actually the same. We are from the same source, whatever we want to call it. And yeah, realizing that, but trying to recognize it every day with everyone I see or meet. And of course, it, it looks like hallelujah, but um, sometimes not they are conscious. But when I make it conscious, when I try to relate to someone else, say, okay, I could have been you, you could have been me, you see each other's eyes and connect that way. That's magical as well. That's so wonderful. When you learn where people come from and what they've experienced and what they do, there's so much connection, and that's wow. And that is magic. That is increasing instead of decreasing. What I thought a long part of my life, there's much more magic, and it gets bigger every day. Wow.
It's the wonder, right? It's just the
Yeah.
wonder, like just the little everyday things that we don't stop. And then you have a child and you see things through their eyes, and then you see it through an animal's eyes, and then it just you just become like a whole, yes, more receptive person. There is something very changing about
You
having
say that
children or being in the
beautifully.
environment
Yes.
of
Yes.
children. I agree. Well, congratulations. That's a wonderful way to end and to finish. So happy for you and your family, and thank you so much for spending time with us to share your heart and your story and the message that you're trying to bring to the world. It's really important work, so we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the wonderful work you do and that Clarissa does. It's really amazing to see that, and it's we realize that a lot of people doing this and are hey, we were trying to get to a better, nicer, more loving world. It's also so heartwarming to to know that there's a lot of people on the planet doing these things, and that's, I think, the beautiful part. We can be overwhelmed by negative news and things that are really
Yes.
terrifying to see, and especially with the current situation in the world on several parts of our planet. Um, but there's so much good going on as well, and there's so much beautiful things and beautiful people, and I think that is really different than centuries and millennia ago. So that also is very hopeful, and that makes me just really smile.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.